Chinese Special Agent Li was assigned by his superiors to come to Paris, France alone to assist the local police in handling a case. He is in contact with Inspector Richard, who has just beaten a suspect to death. Upon meeting, they request Li to hand over his sidearm, as this is French territory, and Li reluctantly complies. Li's task is to monitor the suspect until the transaction is complete and then apprehend them all. However, the arrival of two prostitutes complicates matters. The suspect is attacked and critically injured in the room by one of the women. Sensing something amiss, Li rushes to the scene to rescue him. At this moment, Richard also arrives and instructs his men to stop recording. He then shoots the suspect and the prostitutes, using the gun Li handed over. It turns out Richard is the person the suspect was waiting for. In order to avoid exposure, he kills everyone and frames Li. Unbeknownst to him, due to a keyboard malfunction, his men could only manually turn off the surveillance, resulting in a delay that captured the murder on tape. Richard's men also arrive at the scene, but in the blink of an eye, Li has disappeared. By now, Li has leaped from the balcony and climbed to the 5th-floor room along the exterior wall of the hotel. He walks past the guests and nods in acknowledgement. When Richard arrives at the 5th floor, Li has already climbed back up to the 8th floor along the exterior wall. The police in the surveillance room are unable to track Li's movements, unaware that Li has already returned to the surveillance room and effortlessly takes away the recording of Richard's crime. However, as soon as he steps out, he encounters the police. He quickly hides in a utility room, barricading the door with a cabinet. Unfortunately, Richard and his men's firepower is too strong, and the wooden door and cabinet are soon riddled with holes. But by the time they enter the room, Li has already hidden in the ducts. Richard orders his men to investigate, but as soon as one peers in, he receives a kick to the face. Li attempts to climb upward, but a laundry worker throws down a bundle of clothing, blocking the duct. Richard pours alcohol into the duct and ignites it, then throws in a grenade. Quick as lightning, Li grabs the grenade and tosses it out as he slides down the duct, landing it perfectly in one of the men's sleeves. With the explosion, Li safely reaches the ground floor, escaping the blast unscathed. Richard, now covered in soot, curses furiously. As the police arrive to surround the laundry room, Li anticipates their movements, swiftly neutralizing them before they can react. Even reinforcements fall to a single shot, all evaded by Li effortlessly. However, just as Li reaches the hotel lobby, he is spotted by another assailant who opens fire with 2 submachine guns, a hail of bullets raining down. Li swiftly navigates through the corridor, using cover to dodge the attack. Seizing the opportunity as the assailant reloads, Li strikes, heading straight for the pool table and delivering a swift kick to the assailant's forehead with a billiard ball. Li has already successfully left by the time Richard arrives, and what terrifies Richard the most is that Li took away the recording of him committing murder. Richard flies into a rage, unaware that Li is currently hiding under a car, leaving the scene with the convoy. Li temporarily returns to the branch office, awaiting further instructions from superiors. This is a shop disguised as a store, where Li, the 5th agent arranged by the manager. The previous 4 agents have all ended up as corpses. At this moment, a woman, Jessica, who has been beaten stands at the door. The manager is about to chase her away, but Li stops him. As the manager is about to leave for a delivery, he curses helplessly at the woman. As soon as the manager leaves, Jessica asks to use the restroom, but Li refuses. Jessica then suggests she'll just relieve herself on the spot, which alarms Li into letting her in. After using the restroom, Jessica is drawn to the rice on the table and starts gobbling it down, clearly famished. Li, wanting to minimize interaction, gives her 2 packets of shrimp chips and pushes her out. At this moment, the phone rings, revealing that Li's superior has arrived in Paris. Despite Richard presenting various forged pieces of evidence in an attempt to convict Li, his superiors expressed doubt. As an elite among elites, Li is fiercely loyal. His superiors arrange for a private meeting with him, but their conversation has already been monitored by Richard. On the cruise ship, Li produces the recording containing evidence of Richard's crimes. His superiors instruct Li to return home immediately. Before the conversation ends, someone opens fire on the superior, revealing that the police have already infiltrated the cruise ship. Li breaks through the glass and climbs to the top of the cruise ship, only to encounter special forces lying in wait. Despite being outnumbered, Li fearlessly takes them down with ease, tossing them overboard before leaping onto the deck. Facing 3 oncoming special forces, Li wields a nearby skateboard as a weapon, swiftly incapacitating them. Meanwhile, Richard fires several shots from the bridge above the cruise ship, all of which Li dodges. By the time the cruise ship emerges from the other side of the bridge, Li has vanished, successfully escaping along the bottom of the bridge. However, Li doesn't emerge unscathed this time. His arm is grazed by a bullet, and without timely medical attention, the consequences could be dire. This scene is witnessed by Jessica, who voluntarily stitches up Lee's wound. As they chat, Jessica reveals that she is American and was initially drawn to Paris by the romance of French men. After giving birth to a man's child, she was abandoned and eventually became a money-making tool for the local gang. After stitching up the wound, Jessica prepares to leave, but a local thug responsible for the street walks into the shop and assaults Jessica, claiming that Lee has occupied her time and demands payment of 500 francs. Lee, not wanting trouble, hands over the money, but the thug demands an additional 500 francs as compensation. Lee reluctantly complies, but when the thug tries to assault Jessica, Lee snaps. He grabs the thug and brutally beats him on the table. Despite the arrival of his henchmen, they are no match for Lee's fluid and devastating attacks, and they are swiftly defeated. At this moment, a burly man enters the scene from outside, his formidable strength and physique posing a significant threat. Lee adjusts his stance, preparing to face the formidable opponent. This man is robust and punches with ferocity. Against a lesser adversary, they would stand no chance against his attacks. However, Lee is agile and skilled at targeting his opponent's weak spots. Even though the opponent has the advantage in strength, as long as their footing is unstable, Lee continues to target their head. However, their fight attracts nearby police who happen to be Richard's henchmen. Just as Lee defeats his opponent, a machine gun appears behind the manager, and the intense firepower instantly reduces the shop to rubble. As the police enter to assess the situation amidst the debris, Lee, armed with chopsticks, viciously attacks their necks. Richard, losing his trusted henchman, swears revenge but finds himself powerless against Lee's elusive movements. Lee asks Jessica to take him back to the hotel for clues. Jessica recalls being present when Richard committed murder. Richard controls all of Paris's underworld, and he also took Jessica's daughter, forcing her to work for him. Lee hopes to enlist her help as a witness, but Jessica's condition is to rescue her daughter. The plan is set. Jessica will provide Richard with Lee's hiding place, tricking him away from the police station. However, Richard doesn't trust her and handcuffs Jessica to a radiator. Unbeknownst to him, Jessica manages to steal the recording and hurries with Lee to the orphanage. On the other side, Richard realizes he's been duped and quickly sends his men to intercept and relocate Jessica's daughter from the orphanage. Lee does everything he can to save Jessica and safely delivers her to the ground using bed sheets. Unfortunately, Jessica is critically injured by gunfire. Lee carries her to the hospital, where, upon awakening, Jessica tearfully begs Lee to save her daughter. Lee helps her fall asleep with a silver needle, silently resolving to make Richard pay for his actions. Lee single-handedly storms the police station, knocking out the guard with a swift kick and making his way to the lobby. Richard panics, shouting about an intruder, as police officers rush down the stairs. Lee ducks into a room, locking the door behind him, only to realize he's in the police station's martial arts training area. Lee grabs 2 police batons, each strike hitting vital points, leaving no one able to withstand a single blow. By the time reinforcements arrive, the floor is filled with groans of pain. Lee enters the top floor from above the elevator and closes the main entrance door. Waiting for him here is a formidable opponent with exceptional leg techniques, his long legs giving him a significant advantage. Lee is completely suppressed, but he leads the opponent into the office area, where the confined space and desk legs restrict his leg movements. Lee's feints disorient him, ultimately leading to his defeat at Lee's hands. Finally facing Richard, who threatens Lee with the little girl's life, Lee assures him that if he shoots, Lee will have enough time to kill him. Richard chooses to shoot at Lee, who dodges and swiftly injects him with a needle into the back of his neck. Richard immediately becomes immobilized. It's a fatal pressure point, and soon, all his blood will flow to his brain, leading to death from exsanguination. This point is known as the kiss of the dragon. As Richard dies in agony from the weight of his sins, Lee removes an acupuncture needle from Jessica's neck, waking her up. Upon awakening, she joyfully finds her daughter peacefully sleeping by her side.